Let's jump right back into it. Today, our explainer is zeroing in on Chapter 11 of Nāgārjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. Now, since we've already nailed down the Madhyamaka basics together, we don't need to rehash the emptiness of emptiness. We're completely bypassing all of that. Instead, we're diving headfirst into Nāgārjuna's absolute deconstruction of existential limits. We'll be specifically analyzing the supposed past and future limits of existence, basically the boundaries of samsara. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll tackle the linear time illusion. Then, we'll deconstruct the temporal triad. After that, we apply the tetralemma, explore the centerless fractal cycle, and finally, we'll look at transmuting ignorance into wisdom. Okay, part 1, the linear time illusion, the Abhidharma perspective. To really appreciate what Nāgārjuna is dismantling here, we have to start by looking at the baseline view held by the conventional Abhidharma schools of his day, like the Sarvastivada. They essentially pictured samsara as a straight line, a sequence of inherently existent, momentary events. And honestly, our own conceptual minds do the exact same thing, right? We naturally force the strict grammar onto reality. We treat birth as an absolute beginning or past limit, aging as the duration or the present, and death as the absolute ending or future limit. We put them into these neat, discrete, causally effective little boxes. But as we're about to see, this rigid framework of independent events is exactly what's about to be completely taken apart. So let's move into part 2. Deconstructing the temporal triad using steps 1 through 5 of our Madhyamaka logical framework. We're going to move systematically here. We start by identifying this triad of becoming, and then we expose its logical contradictions. From there, we ultimately prove that these spheres, the beginning, middle, and end, are entirely empty of inherent existence, but they are still dependently co-horizon. And this realization leads us directly to observing the union of the two truths. To really anchor ourselves in step 1, we need to clearly define the spheres we're looking at. So purva is the past limit, think origination or birth. And APARAKITI is the future limit, cessation or ending, relative to any entity or cycle. By doing this, we are precisely isolating the existential boundaries of samsara. We're asking the big question, do these boundaries actually hold up when we apply ultimate analysis? Which brings us to section 3, applying the tetralemma. The logical absurdity of sequential boundaries. Here is where it gets really fun. Applying step 2, the tetralemma, proves beyond a doubt that these phases logically cannot be sequenced as prior, posterior, or simultaneous. Let's break it down. First, if birth inherently comes first, totally independent of aging and death, well, then you're proposing the birth of a deathless entity, which is absolutely absurd. Second, if the ending, aging and death, somehow comes first, then you've got the uncaused dying of an unborn entity. Again, complete nonsense. Third, if you argue they happen simultaneously, then the entity is literally dying at the exact moment of its birth, which renders both processes completely uncaused. So by eliminating literally every extreme position about birth, aging, and death, we force the conceptual, dualistic mind to hit a logical brick wall. These sequences simply cannot be inherently existent, non-existent, both, or neither. And this quote hits the nail on the head. As the great sage states directly in the text, cyclic existence is without end and beginning. The absolute beginning and absolute ending of samsara are functionally impossible. They are just completely ungraspable. Building on that, let's look at the second half of our framework, steps 6 through 11. We move from recognizing the mirage-like nature of time, pushing past all those conceptual proliferations, straight through to the realization of non-dual suchness. It's the realization that reality exists totally beyond these conditioned, dualistic little boxes we try to force it into. Let's explore that further in section 4, the centerless fractal cycle, transcending dualistic conceptual proliferations. Having completely exhausted our reliance on rigid boxes using the generalized tetralemma back in step 7, step 8 invites us to adopt the middle way, and the result is incredibly profound. Instead of a linear timeline, existence operates as a non-linear continuum. Reality is a limitless, centerless, fractal karmic cycle. Every apparent beginning is simultaneously an ending, depending entirely on your perspective. The destination instantly conditions and redefines the new origin. It's this continuous, deeply participatory loop of updates, and it is perfectly empty of any solid frozen core. And this brings us right to the union of the two truths. Look, conventionally, sure, we experience a linear sequence to navigate our daily lives. We have to. But ultimately, there is an emptiness of absolute boundaries. Think about it. It is only because the temporal limits of samsara are ultimately empty of inherent existence that the fluid cycle of birth and death can conventionally function at all. It's a karmic mirage. It's there, yet not there. The appearance and the emptiness absolutely require each other.
Section 5. Transmuting Ignorance into Wisdom, the Dissolution of Samsara and Nirvana.
All right, this is the profound climax of Chapter 11. Because there's no real absolute beginning or ending to anything. That rigid conceptual boundary we draw between samsara and nirvana completely dissolves. Now, the standard dualistic view is all about rejecting craving and extinguishing samsara so you can escape to some separate nirvana. But as our analysis just proved, that's way too dualistic. We are not escaping a burning building here. The non-dual view is actually about transmuting ignorance into wisdom. It's realizing that the cycle itself, when you strip away the conceptual grasping and truly perceive it with wisdom, is already primordially pure. Samsara, exactly as it is nirvana, as long as you're not looking at it through the tinted glasses of inherent existence. So how do we actually live in this limitless, fractal reality? Well, we have to master step 9, acting without acting. This means we fully engage in the conventional world. We do our work, we participate in life, the whole shebang. But we do it without attachment, without reification, and without needing an absolute grip on reality. We just use the concepts of time, birth, and death as provisional tools, knowing full well that they are completely fluid, centerless mirages. To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this non-conceptual contemplation. If every destination is really just a new origin, where exactly are you rushing to? Think about that as you navigate your own centerless karmic cycle today. Through Nāgārjuna's logic, we've clearly seen that our rigid boundaries are just illusions, and true freedom actually lies right here, right in the flux. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.